Hey everyone, welcome back to Where in the Herd is Tiffany. We have a guest today, and if you follow my videos, you may have seen her.
Yes.
But we are talking about a completely different topic on today. But let's welcome Jas. There's no audience, Jas, but I'm going to give you a round
Oh,
of
that's
applause
so
anyway.
sweet. Thank you. And thank
um,
you for having me.
Thank you for coming on again. We may call on you another time, so just be
I
prepared.
like talking to you. It's good. It's good stuff.
So I'm going to let Jas introduce herself really quickly. And then we are going to actually let me introduce our topic first before I have
Sure.
to introduce yourself.
Mhm.
So today, this is Jas and from the Jazzy Nation, and we are going to be talking about therapy. Okay, you're like, what does therapy have to do with travel? It has a lot to do with travel.
It does.
And so I'm excited to have her on because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's the day they dedicated for the month of May. And we know mental health awareness is all year long, but this is the one that they pay a special dedication to. So I'm excited to get into this topic. Jas did a video and I was like, okay, I gotta have you on because I think this topic is too good not to mention to other
Yes.
travelers that are traveling. So, Jas, I'm going to give it to you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to jump straight into this conversation because it's
Sure.
much needed.
Yes. Okay. So, like you mentioned, my name is Jasmine Okocha. I am a digital storyteller. I'm an educator, an entrepreneur, and an expat and traveler. I mean, I wear many hats. But today, I guess we're educating on therapy for expats and just, bringing it home for those that need a little additional help as they maneuver through their journey as people living abroad. So I'm really excited to talk about this topic and just bring some awareness and shed light on mental health.
Exactly. I think mental health is a topic that, even with them having a whole month dedicated, I still don't think we talk about it enough.
Mm-mm.
I definitely think there are people suffering with mental illness that don't talk about it. Maybe you're not getting the help that they need, and different things like that. And so, when we talk about therapy for expats, I thought it was super important because I just think there's stigma around therapy. Let's just start there. There's stigma around therapy, and I'm going to say it may be in all communities, but I know in
Mm.
the African American community, it is like a stigma is like, oh, she's crazy. Or therapy, like no. Or the other thing is, and Jas, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe you're a Christian as well. Being a Christian, a lot of people say, just pray about it, right?
Mhm.
And I am in the therapy. I should have wore my shirt.
Oh, you have a shirt.
Yeah, I actually have a shirt. That's funny. I have a shirt called Prayer. It's Prayer in Therapy or something. I actually made the shirt, but I can't remember what I put
Mm.
on the shirt. But it's a purple shirt. So I'm going to show you before the end of this show
Okay.
is over. But the reason why I had the shirt made because I actually was doing a presentation at a church, and they had me talking
Mhm.
about therapy, and so I feel like it's very important because where do you think the stigma of therapy or seeking out help comes from? I think we have this and I don't just say strong woman syndrome. I think Black people are supposed to be strong all the time.
Yes.
And it's like, if we're strong, then I can't ask for help. I don't know. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts of thinking of why there is a stigma when it comes to seeking out therapy?
I don't know. I feel like the stigma is mostly surrounded by embarrassment, and also being strong. So if you tell somebody that you're in therapy, that means that you're not strong, quote unquote. It means that you're also telling your family's business, because when you're
Wait, stop
in
right there.
therapy.
Stop right there, Jas. Okay,
Yes.
that is a good one. Telling your business, or have a pen, I'm
Mhm.
writing notes. But yes, they always think do not. And what is the saying? What stays in this house, what goes on this house stays in this house. I bet
Mhm.
not hear that nobody know what's going on in this house. That is a
Yes.
big common one.
Yeah, and I think it you know makes you fearful of even sharing, sometimes even with friends, right? And so if you're not even going to go to therapy, sometimes you need to talk. So sometimes you are going to express your feelings, your concerns, your likes or dislikes to people around you, and that's totally fine. I feel like we all need friends and family members that are willing to be listening ears to us. But I think in that, it festers, I feel like, in a cyclical pattern where we're just kind of sharing our traumas and our issues with each other continuously and not really getting it out. And so I think for me, that's what was important about therapy. It was kind of breaking the chains of trauma within my life, within my family's lives, by not always having to share what I'm going through with everybody that also could be, I guess it could cause stress for them too, if that makes sense. So, you
That
know,
that's a good point. Yes, and I also feel like our family and friends are not trained therapists. So I can
mhm,
talk to you all day long and you can
mhm,
listen, but if there's no techniques or tools that are being put in place, then at that point we're just talking. And so
mhm,
I'm still not. I'm able to, like, I guess, unburden myself, but at the same time, I'm still not getting help from what's going on.
right.
And you made a good point too. Like, what if they're experiencing the same thing you are? So then what are we
Mhm,
doing? We're kind of just unloading off
mhm.
on each other.
Feeding off of each other. Mhm,
Exactly. And you talk about, I forgot the term for it. But I can't remember the term right now. Of course, I'm drawing a blank as I'm talking to, but there is something where if one person keeps hearing trauma, they're also experiencing trauma either. And this is why
mm.
you have therapists going to see therapists. Like, you have to make sure that you're getting treated as well while you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the term is secondhand trauma. So if you experience something and then you tell me, and I'm not mentally equipped to handle what you told me, if it's a traumatic event or something that happened to you, then I start to keep that into my spirit and my soul. And it feels like it happened to me as well, even though it didn't happen to me. It's just like I feel so strongly and so deeply for you. And I care so much about you. And so, whatever you're feeling or whatever has happened to you, it ends up just manifesting in my own spirit. And I think that that is, it's a little unhealthy. I think, and not that you shouldn't tell me, right? If we're close, not that you shouldn't tell me the things that are going on in your life, but if you can open up to a neutral person who can also give you ways to manage the trauma or the issues that you're having, it breeds a healthier mindset in the end because you're actually learning how to cope with those things. And I think that's important. It's so important to learn the tools and mechanisms for
Right.
coping versus just talking, because at the end of the day I can tell my story to like 20 people, and if they aren't trained to help me cope, then I'm just talking, and it's kind of a waste of time. So,
Right.
I feel that sometimes, and of course, again, keep talking to the people that you're around, um, but just know that you need help. I think that's the bottom line, is
Right.
that we as people and as a people need to start seeking help for the things that we've gone through and the things that we're gonna go through. And
And help is okay. Like, what I feel like, help should not be a negative word.
right.
Help is like, it's positive. Like, who doesn't need anybody? Like, come on
Hmm.
now. We need every the world. We If there is not a grocery store worker, if there's not a doctor, if there's not a nurse, if there's not these different people in place, if there's not a sanitation team cleaning the street up, like, it's those little things that make the world go round, and we all need help. Like, I don't
Yeah.
care what it is. And so if you think of it like, hey, you help me, I need help, like, I think then that'll make this circle where you feel like, okay,
Hmm.
it's not like me being disconnected.
Exactly.
So since we're talking about being an expat,
Hmm.
explain what an expat is, and then tell me, like, when did no, I'll let you explain that. What is an expat?
Okay, so an expat is someone who decides to move abroad, mostly for professional reasons. I would say there's a misconception between what an expat is and a digital nomad, for example. An expat is somebody that decides to move abroad, but they don't relinquish their citizenship to their home country. So for me, I currently live in Ecuador, but I'm still a US citizen, and I still have my ties and all the things that make me a US citizen. I still have those things. And so, although I live abroad, I can always come back. And so, our time abroad is usually temporary. So, we don't usually plan to live in a country for The rest of our lives, we always plan to come back, and it's usually tied to some sort of professional endeavor. So my husband, he works with the Foreign Service, and that is why we live in Ecuador at this time.
Okay, yes. So some people, like you said, some people get confused, like, what is that? Or, of course, if you're an expat, you may know, but I just want to make it clear for those that
Yeah,
didn't. And yes, if I were expat, definitely not renounce that U.S.
it's
Citizen
golden.
card. Like, I know there's talks of people like, oh, I want to be this, and nah, I could be a double citizen, but I'm not giving up this. We definitely have
Mhm.
privilege, even with the U.S. being crazy
Crazy.
as
Oh
it
my
is.
gosh.
I would never give up my passport for another country. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, we definitely, my little blue book definitely gives me a whole lot of privileges. I'm not
Yes.
giving up, even if I decide to move to another country. So be
Yes.
careful when y'all talk about, oh, I want to give it up. But, that's your decision.
Mhm. Mhm.
But so when you talk about the expat life, Jazz,
Mhm.
people automatically assume that the world is, a great place once you leave and once you go abroad.
Mm.
But talk a little bit about the misconceptions maybe that people living abroad may think about.
Mm.
Or may, I ain't gonna say disillusion, because I think it's more like it's not vacation anymore. So can you kind of
Mhm.
touch on that a bit?
Well, that's exactly it. You move abroad for work or for a purpose. And, at first, well, I'm not even going to say at first, because for me, my experiences have been because we're moving abroad for specific purposes. We get into a country and then we start working right away. So we don't even get to experience the vacation immediately. And unfortunately, expat life is not always a vacation. It's a beautiful thing, though. I think it allows you to experience a similar life, a working life, a life that you would have in your home country, just somewhere else with different opportunities in a different environment. I think that that's really special. But the same stressors that you would have, for example, working a 9 to 5 job in the United States, or whatever your lifestyle is in the United States, you do sort of bring that with you when you move abroad. And I think the joys of being somewhere else, like I mentioned, it's that change of scenery. Is maybe you live closer to the beach. You get to have a little bit of location independence when you move abroad, but you still have to pay bills. You still have to make sure that you can fund the lifestyle that you are wanting to live. And what's great too about living abroad for some folks, we've experienced this in some countries, not all countries we've lived in, is sometimes cost of living is cheaper, or you can find different amenities that suit you, that might be more budget friendly, and so that's always nice. But it's also not always the case. So sometimes
Right.
you're actually spending the same amount on groceries in a country that you would be spending in the States. So yes, working to fund your life is going to be important, because you would not
Yeah,
be
and
able to have that lifestyle.
yeah, I've never technically moved. I feel like the longest place I stayed was Ghana. Was about 2 months was the longest I
Hmm,
stayed, but I wasn't working, so it was still almost like vacation. So I didn't feel
that's
like that.
nice.
But it does remind me of when I went to the Virgin Islands to volunteer. I was volunteering. You might as well say I was working volunteering. We
Yes.
were working from 7 in the morning to about 4 in the afternoon every day.
Mm,
And I think they even had us volunteering on Saturday. So we literally got a day and a
you're
half.
busy.
So although it's not the same as living as an expat, it reminded me because it was going to work every day. So there was this beautiful island, but I wasn't enjoying the island. Like, we didn't enjoy the island till really on the weekends. And
Yes.
so if you're talking about an expat life, that would be like an expat life. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, the beach is down the street, but did I get to go visit? Because after work, I'm tired. Like, I want to
Hmm.
stay on the camp. And so I would just decide to stay on the camp. But I feel like that's what kind of expat life is. You're there, but you may not be able to just go see the sites like you would if you were on vacation.
You have to make an effort, and I think moving abroad is actually the biggest effort that you end up making. Obviously, you made that choice to say, okay, I'm going to leave one place and go somewhere else because of all of these different possibilities. And then if you get to a place, and like if you're a homebody, like my husband and I were homebodies, like it takes effort to say, okay, we have to plan something because we can't just live in a place like Ecuador and just
And
be in the
also,
house all day,
right.
So we have to actually try, and there's so many other factors too, I think, that go into the amount of effort that you're willing to put into going somewhere. If your job is stressful, for example, it does in fact make it harder for you to have the motivation to go out. But I think everybody's different, and different individuals, different groupings of people. For example, if you're married, or if you're solo abroad, living abroad, or if you have kids, like it's going to be different dynamics when it comes to how you get out, and how often you get out too. But it really does, like it has to be a mindset shift, I think, when it comes to the things that you are going to do while you're abroad.
Right. And two, I also feel like the same way, like when I moved to DC for school, there's so many things to do in
Mm-hmm.
DC. And I feel like well, we definitely hung out or whatever, but like some of the museums and stuff like that, like I didn't see that till year two when my family came for
Mm.
graduation. So I feel like it's almost kind of the same when you're living somewhere. Sometimes you are
Yes.
not as a vacationer, so you're just living daily life and you're not going out to see those attractions and stuff. Like you're intentional about vacation.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about. So, at what point did you feel like, hey, I'm abroad. This is real life. At what
Mhm.
point did you feel like you needed therapy? Like, were there signs? Where there's
Mhm.
like, at what point did you say, I need help?
It's actually funny. So I started my therapy journey, I would say probably December, January, December of last year, January of this year. But I felt like I needed therapy probably years ago.
Okay.
But the stigma and the fear of how much it cost, and sometimes I get lazy and research, and all the things. There's so many obstacles that were put, or that I put in my way, that prevented me from actually seeking out therapy. And I let that happen for years. And so it wasn't until I got pregnant, I'm currently still pregnant, that I was going through what I think was probably prenatal depression. So there, you hear a lot about like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, but I was struggling with being pregnant, and also transitioning. I had just moved to Ecuador, but something I realized within my life is transitions in general are hard for me. So I'd always fall into this pattern of not feeling mentally well, mentally healthy when I would move from one place to another. And it really did, have an impact on me being an expat. It correlated greatly to me being an expat. So every time I'd move from one place to another, I would fall into depression. I would be really sad. I'd be really homesick. I'd let culture shock really affect me as well. People talk about culture shock, and you see these really cute, fun videos on like TikTok about different culture shocks people experience, but those things are real, and they can really affect you to your core versus them just being something surfacey and cute.
And give me two culture shocks that you experienced.
Oh, okay. So the first country that I moved to was Morocco, and I'm from Denver, Colorado. Currently in Denver now, and you hear nothing. Like it's quiet, it's just pristine, and just there's no noise. And
Compared to
I
Morocco,
moved to
not
Morocco.
not a catch. I don't know where you were at, but if you
Mhm.
were there, like, yeah, I can
Ooh.
see.
I I moved to Casablanca, Morocco, and
Okay.
our apartment was on the busiest street in Casablanca, and it was at an intersection that every time the light would turn red, all you would hear is honking, honking,
Honking,
honking,
honking.
and it was just like I just felt like my ears were gonna fall off. Like, and so that's one culture shock. Another culture shock, I would say, experiencing this in Ecuador, the country that I'm currently living in, is just the language barrier. Going out and trying to communicate with people. It's not that folks don't want to communicate with me, and don't want to revert to English. I've been learning Spanish for almost a year straight, And so it's just that frustration on my part where it's like, I'm frustrated that I can't communicate and I
Right.
can't get my point across and the things that I need. So, yeah, those are two big culture shocks that I've experienced. And then I've got a list of others that I've probably talked about in videos and posts and stuff too, that are just like, once you actually sit and think about it or sit and write them down, you're like, dang.
Right, exactly. And these are things I want to talk about. Like, it's lovely moving abroad, but these are things that you are going to experience that could aid. And you talked about being lonely. I don't know, did you mention that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Being lonely, like not having people around, like your family is far away, you know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? And the time difference, trying to talk to them or
Yeah.
trying to make new. I feel like as an adult, I feel like it's harder to make friends. Thank God for social
It's
media. I will
difficult.
say that, but I feel like it can be harder making friends in another
Mhm.
country. Like, how many people do you know that lives in Ecuador? Or can, maybe they're working, maybe you're working. So I feel like that will also be a huge issue as well.
I would say it's similar to the effort of going out. You have to seek friendships.
Right.
Stuff is not going to just come to you just because you move abroad and imagine this fantastic life. You actually have to reach out to people. You have to be going to places because that's where people are. Again, you can't just sit in your house all day and expect for things to come to you. Yeah, so
Exactly.
it is difficult making friends abroad, and it can sometimes feel a little lonely, especially, just depends on your personality type. I feel like maybe a more extroverted, maybe like you, Tiffany, an extroverted personality, you can, matriculate a little bit better and like find people to talk to, and then, um, maintain some friendships or relationships a little easier than maybe I would. I'm a little shyer, so it takes me some time.
We're also people,
It
right?
does.
Right, yeah, and we're not, and these are not negative things we're talking about. We're just talking about things that you could experience living
Mhm.
abroad.
Yes.
Um, Anything else that you can think of that would be kind of like
Mm.
that would kind of put you in a, not, I didn't say weird place. That's not the right word. But just being something that you have to get used to as an expat. I guess that's maybe the phrase. But the language one is a good one, Jazz. Like, yeah, that
Yeah,
language ain't no joke.
it isn't. I've lived in 3 countries now where the
So
language
it was,
barrier was a thing.
Ecuador was Spanish, Morocco
Mhm.
was, what's their one of their main languages?
French and Eurasia. So I learned
Okay.
French, and that was helpful, but it still wasn't enough. I was like, "Dang,
Right.
so much time learning French." And then in India, people will say that you don't need a language to go to India or to live in India, and it's true. Most people speak English, but it's still nice to learn the local language.
Right.
I was in Hyderabad, and what was the language? I'm blanking on the language now, but it would have been nice for me to know,
Exactly.
more than just a few phrases in the local language, because it's just nice to be able to communicate and exchange
Exactly.
pleasantries. And if you're talking about making friends, like it's nice
Right.
if
Exactly.
you
That
can at
may
least
be
say hello.
exactly. Exactly. Okay, so those are some of the things where you felt like maybe you needed before, and that's another good thing to point out because you said maybe you needed it years ago before you even started
Mhm.
being the expat life. So I think that's one of the things to point out too, that just because you move abroad, some of those same mental health issues that you were having in the US, they don't just stop just because you move to another country. As a matter of
Mhm.
fact, you are probably carrying them with you.
Mhm.
So okay, now we're fast forward to now you feel like I need it. What was the next step in actually trying to figure out? Because people are probably like, okay, I know I need it, but where do I start to even look for a therapist? It seems scary looking for a therapist in the US, and we have insurance and different things like
Yes.
that. So imagine moving abroad. So if somebody were experiencing mental health issues and they or not, or they just needed somebody to talk to,
Mhm.
where would they start off at?
Well, the great thing about life now is we do have the internet, and so a lot of therapy services are available via the internet. And so you have services, I believe, Better Health is one, and there are a bunch of other ones that people have talked about. The therapy group that I am utilizing at this time is called the Truman Group, and they are specific for expats. And this is not sponsored. They don't even know that I'm making this little claim. I'm just sharing it.
And that's
But
Truman.
yes, the
Okay,
Truman Group.
Truman Group. Okay, so we'll
Hmm.
make sure for you all to put that in the description box. Okay, the
Yeah,
Truman Group. And they're specifically for expats.
specifically for
Okay.
expats. And going back to my definition of what an expat is, I had mentioned that expats, we travel for professional reasons. And so with the Truman Group in particular, they are affiliated with government programs, private companies, NGOs, and international schools. So if you, for example, are a teacher, they are more likely to work with you, because you have that affiliation with an international school, and all the other avenues that I mentioned as well. And so that's nice because that means they work with insurance as well. So it's very helpful, and that's also why you don't want to give up ties to your home country,
Right.
because for me as an American, I'm able to utilize my American insurance, to obtain therapy and
Oh,
to
nice.
pay a little less than what the actual cost is, because we talked about early on when I was seeking therapy, the cost made me fearful. I've heard that therapy is really expensive and that most people, I mean, people that I know can't afford therapy necessarily because of the expense. Um, but other races can afford therapy, and so in my mind I'm like, okay, let's see how can this be possible for me. And so looking
And
at it.
when you talk about the
Mhm.
cost, what with your insurance, like do they do it per session? Do they do it per month? Like how do they figure out the cost
Mhm.
and what will an average cost be?
So I am charged per session, and what's great about this program is they're very upfront with the cost. So you don't have to sign, like with other therapy groups, you sometimes will sign up and then the next screen will be for them to ask you for your credit card. And so they don't do that. They will have you sign up, and then they will have you do a consultation with somebody. You speak about your needs and the things that you desire when it comes to therapy. And then after that, they will go over the cost for you. And so it is per session, and then you are charged after each session. So if I decide this week I don't want to do therapy and I communicate that, I'm not charged. And then at the end of the month, we are given our bill. Although we've already paid per session, we're given an outline of our bill so then we can submit that to our insurance company, and then they will handle that as a claim, and then we will be reimbursed afterwards.
Oh, okay, okay,
It
okay.
works out well, and it's nice that they actually do a lot of the legwork for you, so you're not fumbling with like 4 to 5 like little bills at the end of the month. It's all in one
But they
one
show you.
sheet.
Okay, that's cool. And so, what do you think? And of course, we know the price will be different depending on your
Mm-hmm.
insurance. But what have you seen typically has yours been, if you don't mind?
Mm-hmm. About $200 per session,
Okay,
and then with insurance, it's about 70 to 80% that they will
pay for
reimburse. Mm-hmm.
that they could. Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
not.
Right, I feel like that's good
Mhm.
because two
And I
hundred.
think that's typical.
Okay, okay, because I was like 200. Ooh, that sounds like a lot. But when you talk about the insurance and different things like that,
Mhm.
then that makes it sound a little bit better, which is great because you always
Yes.
want money back.
Because it's per session, and honestly, it sounds scary because you're like, okay, that's groceries, that's
Right, that's a
whatever,
whole
like for the kids, like
lot.
that's a lot. But definitely working with your insurance, and just seeing how this can work for you. If there are programs that can also assist. I feel like with a lot of things in life, there are programs that we're just not taking advantage of. So if the
Right,
treatment group, for example, doesn't work for you as an expat, or whatever the case might be, there are
right.
programs that we can
Yeah,
utilize.
that's why I was like, if one doesn't, I always say there's 26 letters in the alphabet. If A doesn't work, let me
Mhm.
go to B, and so hopefully you don't have to get to Z, but
Yes.
hopefully something works out on that end. And so, what about your therapist? Because I know you mentioned before that you chose your type of therapist.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about that. Like, can you choose it? Can you make a preference? Can you ask?
Mhm.
Like, what is that process as well?
It was really important for me to suggest or to share my preference during the consultation because I will say this in the past I've considered different therapist options and maybe have had consultations or one-offs with certain folks and they just didn't fit. They just it honestly just made me really feel discouraged because either they didn't look like me or they didn't have similar experiences or just didn't understand exactly where I was coming from. And so that wasn't helpful. And so that also deterred me from looking into therapy until I actually started this whole process. And so when I had my consultation with folks from the Truman Group, I did express that I wanted to speak with a woman of color. I didn't specify Black woman, because, that could be, you know, very specific.
Right, right.
But, I just wanted a person of color, somebody that could relate to me and who was female as well, because that was something that I was looking for at the time. And I'm still working with this person and she's amazing. And I do feel like we're able to relate to each other on a lot of different levels. And I'm very happy with who they paired me with.
Okay, so that's great to know that you can have options. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, like, sometimes it could take a couple to get to the right person. So
Yes.
definitely do not get discouraged if you like, hey, this first therapist, it did not work, blah, blah,
Yes.
blah. I promise you there is somebody out there for you.
Yes.
And
And ask
so,
questions too. I think um, asking, this is kind of funny, but even asking your therapist, are you in therapy? Or do you have children? It doesn't just have to be surface level of what a person looks like, because even if a person looks
looks
like what
like
you might
you, right?
prefer, they still might
They
not
still
be
exactly.
what you prefer. So you definitely ask questions during your initial calls because it is money. You are spending money and you are spending time and energy and effort to
With
share
this.
all these different things. So get what you need, ask all the questions that you have.
No, yeah, that's super, super important because you have to see if the therapist is compatible for you as well. Like the
Yes.
goal is to like, get help with what you're going through. So speaking of therapy itself, tell us a little bit like how because some people are like, well, what is done in therapy? Do I just talk? Is it silent? Like, can you talk a little bit about like what happens in therapy and like how you feel like thus far is being helpful? Are they
Mm.
providing coping mechanisms? Initially, is it just talking? So tell us a little bit about that for those people that have never been in therapy
Mhm.
before.
For me, and therapy is going to be very different for everybody, especially depending on who your therapist is. But for me, a lot of it is talking. I didn't realize that I talk so much. But my therapist, she does provide coping mechanisms for me. And also, um, I think what's funny is, sometimes she'll check me too. What I'm saying is not always correct. If I'm saying I feel this way or somebody did this to me, it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe in this situation, how do you think you could have handled this better? So it's giving me room to critically think about certain situations or my own actions and realizing that this is funny to say as well that other people might not always be the problem, that I am sometimes the problem. And so um,
Recognizing that.
yes, and I think I went into therapy with the first couple of sessions with like all the things I wanted to talk about and all the things that everybody else has done to me and just how I feel and my life and how it's this and how it's that. And then I was like, oh, I contributed to a lot of that.
Right. He's
Okay.
like, I may
Nice.
have played, maybe I played a role in,
A little bit, just a little. Um, and so, yeah, I really, really do enjoy my sessions. I enjoy having the opportunity to share with a neutral person and to not give that secondhand trauma to everybody else that I know. It's nice that it's also confidential too, because I feel like sometimes I just need to unload and also receive the feedback. But in doing so, I feel like, okay, now I'm good for the week. I don't actually want to like talk about these things or think about these things. And it makes the rest of my week at times a little easier because all of that stuff was already talked about, already dumped out. And so we also talk about ways to manage emotions and cope with different things when I'm not in therapy as well. So
Right.
journaling has been a big part of that. Um, I'll probably do some journaling later today because I don't have a therapy session this week. Um, and it's nice because that also is like a good dumping session. But it's great because I think through my therapy sessions, I've been able to um, learn and also figure out ways to manage my own emotions and myself without the additional help, if that makes sense. Where in the past it was like, I feel like I need somebody to hold my hand through XYZ. And now it's like, okay, let's think critically as to
Right.
how I can handle certain situations.
Right, and that's super important because some people, some people do get super, super dependent on their therapist, and it's
Yes.
like, but I won't be around for every little occasion. So,
Yes.
what can you do in the meantime? And
Mm-hmm.
the goal is to not, I mean, now some people need intense therapy and can be in therapy for years or blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. But at some point, the goal is to eventually be able to kind of do things on your own.
Yes.
So I'm glad that they're giving you coping skills as well to focus on that. And then what about like couples therapy? Like, have you ever
Mm-hmm.
thought about that? And do they offer those type of service? Couples, or I guess family therapy as well. Do
Mm-hmm.
they offer those services as well if you were interested?
They do. They offer couples therapy and family therapy as well. And I think we're going to look into doing couples therapy, not because anything is wrong, but actually just to start something before anything happens,
Right,
if that makes
right.
sense.
No, but I'm glad you said that because I feel like therapy doesn't have. I think that's the other misconception that people think that I have to be going through something like super traumatic, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem. I feel like we wait until something what is it, reactive versus
Mm-hmm.
proactive, and
Exactly.
so therapy definitely can mean like I really just need to talk. Like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there is some, even if it's just, oh, I'm a little stressed out at work. That doesn't mean you have a mental health illness, right? Doesn't mean
Right.
there's depression. Just means that I literally need to talk or get, like you said, I think getting a different perspective is also good too, because like you said, people come to me and be like, Tiffany, what do you think about this? And I'm like, well, kind of just what you told me doesn't really sound like what you're like. I don't think it was meant like that. Like, you got to
Mm-hmm.
think about it like a different type of way. So, and I'm not a therapist. I'm
Mm-hmm.
a social worker, but social workers can be therapists,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, just kind of seeing people, just kind of seeing different perspectives is important because our
Mm-hmm.
perspective could be clouded.
Oh, yeah. And I think,
Or it could be right. It just depends. But I think it's good to, be like, well, what did you think about
mhm.
that?
That's how I do it too. Um,
Yes.
but I think when it comes to couples therapy or family therapy, what's nice is you do have that neutral person. So I mentioned a neutral person as you're doing one-on-one therapy. That's important. But if you want to, um, it's kind of like a mediator. So if there is something wrong, for example, a neutral person is a great mediator. And if there is nothing wrong, then it's still great to have that neutral person so that you're not having someone who is on one side or the other. So my therapist wouldn't necessarily be the one to do couples or family counseling for us because she knows me now quite well. So we would get someone else to facilitate that therapy for us. But I think it would be great. I think also one of the reasons why I really wanted to start therapy in this time in my life. I mentioned that I'm pregnant, I'm going to be a mother for the first time, and I just want to be a great mom. I just want to I'll say I want to be the best mom that I can be. I don't want to be the best mom in the world, but I want to be, present in all the
Yeah,
things
I was
that
like, and
I
you want to
do.
be present because if you're depressed or anything like that, and you're not as
Mhm.
present or as well as you could be. And so that's the
Exactly.
thing when you're taking care of other people. If there's something, if you're sick,
Mhm.
you can't take care of other
They'll
people.
feel that, yeah. So I was like,
Exactly.
"Oh, I can't." I mean, it's not gonna be a perfect situation, but I just want to be mentally well for my child. So that is very important to me, and that'll be important moving forward as well, so that I can serve and be as present as possible um, when my baby is here and living his best life.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so Jess, this conversation is going super, super well.
Mhm.
So tell me, do you have any advice for expats, I guess in general, and in terms of the topic that we're talking about today? Do you think that it would be a good idea to kind of get a therapist as a first time expat, or not even just a first time, if you are moving abroad? Is that something that you think that people should check into? We talked about being, proactive. So I guess we'll start off with that. Do you suggest automatically that people may take a couple sessions on? Because and sessions doesn't have to be very weekly in the begin, like, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I think that everybody needs therapy, regardless of if you are an expat or not an expat. But yeah, if you're moving abroad, I think, if you've noticed patterns in your life before moving abroad where work was stressful or where people in your life were stressful or where you were finding it hard to manage certain things in your life, or even if you're moving abroad to escape certain things, then yeah, I would highly recommend that you seek out therapy. I feel like it doesn't hurt to talk to someone if you have the money, if you have the resources to do so. Then yes, I highly recommend that everybody again seeks out therapy. But yeah, I just again with language barriers and just different things that you're not used to when you move abroad, it is nice to have somebody to speak with. And it's not just somebody to speak with about all the things that are going wrong in your life. I had mentioned in the video that you referenced, it's nice to also have somebody to talk to about the joys of living abroad. Sometimes, if you are a single person, for example, or if you are a married person and maybe your spouse is out doing their own thing, you might not have that constant communication with somebody else who can relate to your experiences. And so having somebody that, for me in particular, someone that has either lived abroad or has worked a lot with expats and other people who have lived internationally, it's nice to have somebody to relate to. It's nice to have somebody who understands what expat life is like, because not everybody does. And so I think that's why it's important to have that specific focus when you're looking for a therapist, and for you to ask those specific questions, whether or not you go with a therapy group that I'm associated with, or if you go with a therapy group that you find online. It's important that you just find somebody that is well suited with whatever the needs are that you're seeking to relate to.
Okay. So this has been a lovely conversation.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts about our topic, Jazz, and then let people know where they can find you.
Hmm. I would say that, and my motto is always this: I highly recommend that everybody moves abroad at least once in their life. It really is a transformational experience, the good and the bad and all the in betweens. It's truly a blessing, and I would not trade this expat life for anything in the world. And I'm so glad that, although I've had my challenges and I'm in therapy, good and bad reasons, that it's just been a blessing to be able to live this lifestyle, and I do recommend it to everybody. But yes, so you can find me everywhere online at the Jazzy Nation. I make YouTube videos, Instagram, Facebook. My website is www.thejazzynation.com, so you can find me there as well. I actually have an article that I wrote all about therapy for expats, so you can check that out as well.
Okay, so we are going to make sure that you have all the socials in the description box. So hit up Jazz. I think she also offers services for being an
I
expat.
do, yes. Expat
So
life consultations. Thank you, Tiffany. I'm out of breath though, so I was like, "Ooh, girl, that was a lot." Yes, I do
So,
offer
right, so
services
she's
as well.
pregnant now, but soon as she gets, a couple months into the mommy life, I'm sure she'll be right back at it.
Yes.
But definitely check her out. We're gonna post links to the article and the video because she
Mhm.
goes a little bit more in depth than what we did. And so I'm super, super excited to have you on and talk
Yes.
and bring awareness to mental health month, and just bringing it back to travel because I feel like it's super, super important. And I feel like expat life is just completely different and just kind of getting into the groove of things. I think therapy would be great and it would definitely be helpful. So, Jazzy, thank you so much for coming on. I'm
Thank you
sure
for
we'll have
having
you on the
me.
channel again. If you did not watch that last video, it's all about dating African
Yes.
men.
Mhm.
And people are loving the video, so I'm sure you will too. So definitely
Good.
go and check that out. All right. Thank you so much, Jess.
Yes, thank you for having
We'll
me.
see you next time.
Bye.